Okay, so we're going to make another batch of terrariums. First thing to do is to cut out the bases. That is the screens for sublayer. So one of the problems that I think I've identified over the course of the last 2 months in the first batch of Terraria is that there is too much sublayer and not enough room for the plants to grow into. So you see they fill everything up immediately, and then everything except for the area that is closest to the light ends up dying off. So I think they need a thinner substrate and less soil, and then more room for light and growth. So that's probably the first thing we're going to try to achieve with this second batch, is to give them a little bit more room. The second major issue is that the plants we chose were not, for the most part, actually planted very well. And so most of them just kind of died immediately. And I think that may have had a bit of a chain reaction effect, where the dead plants started decaying and released, whatever gases from their decay into the environment, and that helped kill everything else that was still alive. Which has resulted in the mostly extinct environments in most of these terraria. The exception being the reindeer moss, which does not seem to have been alive to begin with. Probably still going to put a fair amount of it in, because I have a ton of it, but I don't expect it to actually do anything. It's mostly just going to be filler. And on the off chance that we discover later on that no, it's actually alive and growing just very slowly, which, I mean, you do expect it to grow slowly, but in that case, well, we'll have something alive in there. The main thing we're going to be planting, however, is the remainder of this, which I have some produce kind of composting in there. Because this plant, the creeping fig, doesn't seem to be doing terribly well in the pot. Stuff in the terraria is actually doing better, which is the only plant here for which I can say that. So for its own health, I'd like to plant it in there, and because it's so far the most promising specimen we have, that's the other reason why I want to put it in. I did find another one of these whiskey bottles, which look pretty nice. I'm going to try putting the creeping fig in here and see if it does better than the other one, which had all natural plants. To see whether, because that will present the same planting issues. So the creeping fig put in here is probably going to have the same difficulty making root and the same problems that the other jar did. So we'll be able to kind of tell whether it's just the jar is sort of unsuitable, whether it's the planting issue, or whether it was the actual plants that I put in there that matters. Especially because this was the only natural plant placed in the backyard where the most sunlight comes. So that should give us a little bit of insight as to why all that died off. I think I'm going to start with this one, smallest terrarium. So again, we're using less substrate than before. Still need some. Probably a ½ inch, maybe 3/4 of an inch. not the 1 inch to 1.5 inch that went into the first batch. There's not enough creeping fig to fill all of these, so I have some of these other plants. Is that even in frame? Yeah, it is. This is the same empty vase of dirt from the first batch, but it has sprouted a fairly significant amount of life of its own. Since the first batch was planted in January, it's now March. So it's all had plenty of time for new plants to germinate and seeds to get spread everywhere, and I kept that outside so it's got its own life. In fact, you can see a couple of little roly-polies crawling around in it. Which we had in the first batch too, but they mostly seem to have died off pretty quickly. So, don't have terribly high hopes for that. And then I've got a little bit of charcoal that we're going to use. We skipped that last time. I'm going to put it in probably 3 of the terrariums to see if that makes any bit of difference. Which it could. It's not really in granular form, so I'm going to have to, hammer this with a chisel or something. To chip it all off. So, let's see, is that everything that we're changing here? We're using a couple of bigger jars, more light, more creeping fig, less natural local plants. But I will probably scavenge some of these for a couple of them. There's this clover that seems well suited in this. I don't know what it is. I think there might be actually some hackberry trees growing, which obviously are not well suited to a terrarium, but that should at least be funny to watch them mash themselves up against the ceiling if they survive. And then we'll, just take them out of the jar, because at that point I think the experiment for those particular terraria will be over. These are actually probably on the low side, so we'll see. Maybe we'll kind of end up bracketing the space of realistic amounts of substrate that you can put in here. So we've got too much in the first batch and not enough in the second batch, perhaps. We'll see. And then the last thing is that I've got some old coffee grounds. Where did I leave that? These two over here. Oops. So we'll be, Anyway, we'll be supplementing the soil with that for probably just 2 of these. And that will help. Well, it might help. It might not help. That's kind of the point, is to find out. Now we want to put some charcoal in 2 of these. I don't really know. I'm picking these 2, and it's totally arbitrary. So, I don't know really where this came from. I mean, I found it in my yard. I don't know if it's part of, somebody had a fire pit back there for some time, or what. Thing is, with burnt debris, sometimes there's a potential for, unhealthy chemicals that would serve the opposite of the function. I'm putting it in here because I want it to help filter the water. And if it, has some kind of meth remains or something in it, obviously it's going to have kind of the opposite effect of that. So, put just a little bit of this in the base of each of these. And since this end is not entirely burnt, there's not a ton that we can get off of here because it starts to become just wood. That's the dirt phase. This is a little damp. Last time I put it in, it was all dry, so it was easier to get at. It's also, I think, got a little more plant material in it. So this is, compared with you, a fair bit less dirt. In fact, it's kind of hardly any. And there might be a little bit more in the taller ones, but this is pretty short, so that's all there's really room for. Maybe a pinch more over here. Oh, and there's a little onion here. I don't think I want to plant the onion. It doesn't seem like it will. Well, it's a spring onion. I might put it in that whiskey jar because it could potentially fit in the neck. But in this jar, it's definitely too big. Allowing much to pass through the throat of the funnel. And in here, I guess we have to use this end. Oh, where did I put that onion? Did I tear that apart? I'm afraid I might have. Which is a shame because I want to put it in here now. Oh, here it is. I think it will fit. Can get its little roots in there. One. Stubborn. Alright, well, it's sideways, which is probably not good for it. So let's see if we can hook it. Now it's not quite centered, but that's fine. In fact, probably good for it to be a little bit off center because anything we put in there after, if we put anything in there after, is going to end up in the middle. Alright, so I think I'm going to put the coffee grounds in these. No, I wanted this one because it has charcoal. So this front row, not in these back ones. So this one has a little more. So I'm not going to empty the whole thing out into here, but most of it. And the rest, this jar. And it's not important to get every last piece out. And that's probably enough. Probably more than enough. You pretty much doubled the level of soil so that at this point all of these are probably no better than the 1.0 group that had too much soil and not enough headroom. But it is loose and uncompacted, so maybe it will settle a little over time. And then we're ready to plant. So I wanted to put rocks in a couple of them. In fact, I think this one we will put nothing in it and see what happens. So I'm going to give it a rock, but no plants, and we will see if it sprouts any and if they survive. Then these three and this one especially, as I mentioned earlier, I want to put a little bit of the creeping fig into. And I guess I'll put this other rock in near the back, but I'll put other stuff in there with it. I want to use the whole thing, so I think I'm going to try to remove it as gently as possible from this pot. But it has unfortunately been in here for way too long, and I think it's starting to become root bound, so it's going to be a little tricky to push it out of here. Oh, no, that's not that bad, actually. I think that little one there, or you, this seems to be separable from everything else. It does have this root clump that I don't think I'm going to be able to get into the jar. Let's see about this one. It's all one plant, I think, so I'm kind of dividing it up. It requires me to tear a little bit. Well, this one's probably even better. It's more linear. It'll be easier to get through the neck of the jar. Whether I can get all of this in here is a very open question. There we go. And I can just lower it into the side there. That would be better, because the onion's on the other side. So I don't want you taking up all of the space in here, especially because I want the top of the onion stalk to really occupy the neck of the bottle. I'd like this creeping fig to stick around closer to the base. So plus, I mean, I think it is supposed to creep. It grows along close to the ground and sets down roots every so often, which is why this one plant has a bunch of little sections that I can kind of separate out and plant in different jars. So if it's sticking up in the air like this, it's not going to be that good for it, because it's not really going to be able to do that. So, push you just a little bit further back. Oh, and there's a little roly-poly in there. I think that, so the landscape's not totally even, but there's plenty of room up here in the top. There's not too many plants in there, just two. And I think, with any luck, they will survive. This one, I would like to put a piece of creeping fig in. And let's see, can this be divided into more than one plant? It looks like it's a little bitty offshoot over here. Oh, there. I don't know if that's enough to be viable, but I'm going to put it in the smallest one. And that leaves two. This one really has to be one, so I'm going to plant this thing in here, near the base, circling the bottom. And in the middle, I think I'll give it a little bit of clover from here. Not the chickweed that we were calling near clover in the last batch, but actual, well, I believe it's actual clover. Actually, probably not, but it's a different kind of near-ish clover, so. This one, the only other thing I'm going to put in here is going to be some reindeer moss. This one I'll put some reindeer moss and a little bit of one of these. Okay. I'll pull it out now. Wow, there's a heck of a root on that. Got a smaller one over here that's just sprouting. So I'm going to use this plant. And yeah. Well, the dirt fell off the roots. That's probably not ideal. Fairly traumatic for such a tiny young plant. And it fell in near the edge, but I'm going to push it over there. Adjust the soil a bit around the base, clumsily. So that's that. Pull you, push you in around there, so they kind of form something around the base of the rock, and it actually doesn't look terrible. Okay, so with the 1.0 batch, for water, I just used a straw. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 8. Which works fine, but I have no idea how much water that actually was. So for all of the others, I'm just going to give them 1 tablespoon of water. And I don't need the straw for that, or this little can of water. I'm just going to use this. The advantage of the straw, in part, was that it washed off the edge of the container, but for the most part, these don't need that, because they were clean to begin with and we didn't get them all dirty while putting water in them. While planting the plants. So, just open them all up. This is pink. There we go. And of course the soil is already pretty damp, so the addition of, it may not need any water, so the addition of a tablespoonful is perhaps too much, but just like the first time, it is easier to remove water precisely than it is to add it precisely, because you can just open up the lid and let the excess evaporate away. But pouring it in, you don't really have any feedback, and you tend to add too much. So, I think we are erring on the side of more water than necessary, but time will tell. Then after this, the only thing remaining is to label them, and I am not going to bother showing that. I think we're done here.